Right before the pandemic, I decided to take the plunge and treat myself to something that I had always wanted. As a lifelong Xbox gamer, I had looked fondly at the PlayStation exclusive games with real envy. Uncharted, Infamous, Bloodborne, God of War, Ratchet and Clank, Tearaway, soon Ghost of Tsushima. I could have some fun with those games, no question. And I wasn't dissatisfied with my Xbox. Game Pass had really come around lately and I had pretty decent options to play, but there was nothing marquee on the horizon. And I had never truly been some kind of Xbox elitist, but after a lifetime of mostly resisting PlayStation ownership, it felt like a good time to see if the grass was really greener on the other side. Which isn't to say I had no experience with PlayStation and Sony exclusive hardware. My best friend growing up had a PS2, whereas I had an Xbox, so together we had it all. And I got to experience Final Fantasy X, Metal Gear Solid 3, Devil May Cry 3, and Shadow of the Colossus with this hardware. I also owned a PSP for a few years, although I mostly remember it for being my first HD portable internet device and for watching Clive Owen's King Arthur movie on it during a power outage one winter. Most of the games were decent, but as far as PlayStation exclusive experiences, playing the Vita versions of God of War and Metal Gear Solid just wasn't the same as the console brethren. I also traded that PSP and all my games, which I believe were just Metal Gear Acid and King Arthur UMD, to GameStop. For credits, I exchanged for an Xbox 360 HD DVD player, so it's fair to say that it was the apex of good choices in my wildly successful existence. God of War and Horizon Zero Dawn in particular had me very curious. I obviously knew the game of the year, greatest of all time modern classic pedigree that follows Sony first party games, but I just wanted to experience it for myself firsthand. It took most of the year to burn through the PS4 catalog I eventually purchased. And I started with Horizon Zero Dawn, moving on to Spider-Man, The Last of Us 2, Uncharted 4, God of War, Ghost of Tsushima, Final Fantasy VII Remake, Miles Morales, and Shadow of the Colossus, I believe in that very order. And I think it goes without saying that I was immersing myself in the absolute cream of the crop, highest quality content on the platform, even the whole medium. And I feel like I really got a good look at the other side. I learned a lot. It taught me about the quality in games, about expectations, about what a game actually is and how people interact with it. It taught me about perception and branding, marketing and trends. It reminded me that video games are pretty cool. Most of it was incredible, nearly all of it. This was my experience coming home to PlayStation for the first time. And I want to state up front that this is going to be a semi-critical look. So if you just wanted me to be clickbaity and flamebaity and just say PlayStation is better, you're wasting your time. I was open to that eventually being my conclusion, but it isn't. In fact, it most definitely isn't. PlayStation offers a pretty specific type of game as its signature product, and that experience is refined, polished, and impressive to interact with. But it's not inherently the end of all interactive experiences, even if I think it absolutely nails a specific variant. And all the first-party titles have this immaculate, cinematic presentation. Cutscenes, camera angles, lighting, sound design, visual language, character expression, animation, graphical detail, textures and materials, everything you see, everything you hear, everything you feel in these titles is overwhelmingly polished. Not every game has to raise the bar like this, but these games do a good job of trying to push boundaries in some way or another. Obviously, they all have incredible strengths and some weaknesses, but I think it's what makes them the most similar that stood out to me above all else. Let me explain. Horizon Zero Dawn is an open-world action game. It has RPG elements like leveling up and crafting, and I think it's fair to say it has some survival elements in how it uses stamina, resources, and how you interact with enemies and AI using traps. God of War is an open-world action game. It has some RPG elements like leveling up and crafting, and it leans heavily into action and combat, categorically feeling more like a classic action game than anything else, though it does have some minor puzzle-solving and platforming segments that divide the combat arenas. The Last of Us and The Last of Us 2 are pseudo open world action games with some minor RPG elements, mostly weapon resources and crafting. There's also a smattering of survival elements in how the game handles recovery items, ammunition, stealth, and enemy AI. Ghost of Tsushima is an open world action game. It has RPG elements like leveling up, resources, and crafting, and it leans heavily into combat and exploration as a focus with some stealth elements as well. All 5 games are single-player core experiences, dense with expository storytelling through cutscenes, dialogue, and world design, and there's a clear emphasis on polishing the presentation and the primary path. And all these games are incredible, absolutely incredible, and I think if I just had to pick one out of all the PS4 experiences to recommend, I think God of War feels the most impressive to me. The combination of mechanically satisfying, visceral, kinetic combat with a story and general world design that maximizes the use of its set pieces the way it does feels a cut above, even in 2021. What you might otherwise describe as too much backtracking or recycling content is given this insane, mind-shattering context. Most video games like God of War that are this shamelessly straightforward as action games, Devil May Cry for example, do not feel the need to have such deliberate and considerate story explanations for things like fast travel or overworlds, and that's what makes God of War feel so surprising. It doesn't really need a good story with how good it looks and sounds and feels to be impressive, but the fact that it ties it all together, weaves these elements of this interactive storytelling into this serious, complex, mature tapestry is mesmerizing. This game slaps. All the games I've played are incredible, to be clear, but they all kinda a little bit also feel the same. And one of the first impressions I got when I played Horizon Zero Dawn was how much it reminded me of Gears 5. Not just because they both have this incredible art and character design, not just because they both have texture work that makes my eyes sing, but because they're both similar in structural design. Both games have open worlds where you travel between side missions and main missions and fight enemies from behind cover, and while HCD has its own quirks and its own style, it actually shocked me how much parallels there were between the games, how similar it felt. And to be clear, I don't mean this in a bad way, I just mean it's a video game, and it feels like other video games. And one of my big takeaway from the hundreds of hours I spent in isolation burning through my PS4 catalog was this. As an adult for whom video games are a pastime, a hobby, and not the be-all, end-all of my existence, I had not really missed out on anything life essential by not owning a PS4. And yes, these were new video games, but I had played video games before. Like God of War is incredible, but I had already played Devil May Cry 5, Jedi Fallen Order, and Sekiro within the previous year, and would play Cyberpunk and Assassin's Creed Valhalla that fall. God of War is my favorite game on that list, but it's not a wholesale different experience from anything else those other titles have to offer. Light attacks, heavy attacks, blocks, counters, dodges, dodge rolls. I love this stuff. I live for it, but on some level, an action game is an action game, right? If I have one major strike against PlayStation, it's that it doesn't really have a multiplayer game to rival the Xbox experience at all. Microsoft has put tremendous resources into first-party multiplayer suites for the Gears, Halo, and Forza franchises to admittedly mixed results, but the hits are hits for a reason, and people always want to talk about how Sony has the best single-player games on the market, and I would fundamentally agree. But I've spent more time playing PvP social matches in Halo Master Chief Collection than I have played all of my PS4 games combined. And that's okay. There isn't anything inherently wrong with me treating single-player, story-driven games as finite experiences. I've played God of War and Final Fantasy VII Remake both twice all the way through, and someday I will definitely go back and play HCD and Ghost of Tsushima again, and maybe one of the Spider-Man games. But compared to the hundreds on hundreds of hours I can dump into a recyclable PvP title like MCC or Halo 5 or Gears 5, there's a soft cap with most PS4 experiences for me, almost always between 30 and 40 hours. And again, I don't think this is a bad thing. Interacting with single-player, solo-driven experiences in a different way than the more social PvP experiences is entirely part of the appeal. Games are designed to be either recyclable, where you repeat the same content over and over, or disposable, where content is primarily intended to be played through one time, on purpose. Stuff just hits different. And I think I'm talking about this at the perfect time. Jason Schreier's latest article in Bloomberg is pretty enlightening in terms of how it appears Sony is positioning its own developers and catalog. I'll be honest, as somebody who absolutely loved The Last of Us, having just played it last year for the first time, it's not a game that's begging to be remade whatsoever. It's not just because the original already has a PS4 remaster that holds up incredibly well even now, but nothing about the franchise or the technology underneath it would appear to have advanced in any way significant enough to warrant doing this in the first place. I guess on a development timeline, if the game were to launch in 2023, it would be the 10-year anniversary of the original, and that's something. But go back and play the original Last of Us and tell me what it is you exactly think can be improved by the PS5. I think we get a clue in that the Bend Studios, best known for Days Gone, was chosen as the surrogate developer. Compared to the more linear experience of The Last of Us, Ben's gameplay style from Days Gone would seem to bring in a more experienced open-world development team and designers. And I have the suspicion that the game is going to include semi-open world areas or maybe combine some of the otherwise linear areas of the game together. And that's fine. It's a good idea, and I'm all for it. But that's fundamentally the major change that was made to The Last of Us 2 already. And the Seattle section of Last of Us 2 acts as a centralized open world hub where much of the game's content branches out of, at least for the second act. And again, this is fine, but it's not a change to the gameplay or the mechanics of the game so much as rebuilding the combat arenas, which is cool, but the game played pretty good before anyways. What concerns me about Schreier's article is just how likely it all feels, that Sony knows they live and die based on the unimpeachable reputation of their big boy games, and are stuck in this loop with the same franchises that were supposed to have ended with the previous installments, getting new games which are essentially new development teams. An internal struggle to define what's next and whether or not to continue sequeling out these franchises or to build new, riskier franchises is understandable. Not that any of this lack of direction has seemed to affect sales, because PS5 has sold millions and can't keep up stock with basically nothing to play on the market yet. But as someone who's essentially a fresh convert to the brand, I wonder what they really have on the horizon. Some people seem to think they've got a Hammer game or two coming, one of which is rumored to be the Blue Point remake of the Metal Gear Solid original. Something really big and surprising in the works. And maybe they do. But if that game is essentially just a different developer doing another version of the Sony first-party game archetype, I'm going to be a little disappointed. In a remake of The Last of Us bundled with The Last of Us 2 on PS5, an Uncharted remake, Final Fantasy VII Retrograde, or whatever that was called, it all sounds cool, I guess. But Halo Infinite is coming to PC, so I don't need any new hardware for that. And I'll also be able to stream it on my phone over Wi-Fi so I can play it anywhere. And it's a pretty hard sell that I need to go out and drop a minimum of $600 to get a new console and new games when so much of the current and future Game Pass and Xbox content works on my rickety old Xbox One and my PC with cross-save and crossplay, no new hardware required. Heck, a shocking amount of it works on my phone, and you can literally play Gears 5 with touchscreen controls. It's bananas. I think what I'm getting at is console wars, superiority, it's all silly. Play games with your friends, play games that you like that are fun, play games that tell stories that enrapture you with mechanics that hook you and visuals that inspire. And if you really like single-player, story-heavy, cinematically presented experiences, the kind of thing you play with the sound up and the lights down by yourself, PlayStation is probably for you. But you can also get a lot of that experience with Xbox. And you can get some of it with the Nintendo Switch, and you can definitely get it on PC. Heck, they're pretty impressive tablet and mobile games these days, thanks to streaming services like Game Pass Cloud and formerly Stadia, I guess. And these days with crossplay, and big games like Fortnite and Minecraft continue to combine the player pools into one, so you're always where your friends are. I guess what I'm saying is whatever hardware you've got, appreciate it. PlayStation is really great. So is Xbox, and PC gaming has distinct advantages as well. Whatever you're using, as long as you're having fun with it, playing games with your friends, or have the games to play by yourself if that's more your speed, then I think you're doing it right. And I would love to see Microsoft bring Game Pass via cloud services to both Nintendo Switch and PS5. Imagine playing Gears 5 on your creaky old Switch. Heck, Halo would immediately and instantly become the best shooter franchise on both Sony and Nintendo hardware. So why not let everybody play everything, have access to all their friends no matter where they play or what hardware? Players are customers. More players is more customers, is more revenue. Gamers, publishers, developers, everybody wins. And I think the future of gaming, however divided it may seem across different streaming services and platforms and distribution networks today, is moving towards a future that diversifies the access points of entry but unifies the experience underneath. Services like crossplay, cross-save, cloud gaming are all key parts of this framework, and I couldn't be more excited to see how it all winds up integrated together sooner than later. Ubisoft already announced some of this functionality with Ubisoft Connect, though it's more of a future initiative that will apply to games releasing after 2021 and going forward than anything before that. I will forever remember 2020, the global pandemic year, as the era that PlayStation got me through. It was a breath of fresh air I needed. It was a collection of worlds and experiences that I got to take in at my own pace, soak it all in without the zeitgeist discourse hanging over me. And I would equate the experience of playing through PS4 exclusives to the act of seeing a movie by yourself. It's not always as fun as doing it with friends, but there's something about being alone, unbiased by the reaction of others, and to really gauge how a piece of art makes you feel. Kratos and Atreus made me feel like a badass. Aloy made me feel like a badass. Spider-Man really makes you feel like Spider-Man.
38 seconds, IGN. You made it 38 seconds without saying it makes you feel like Spider-Man.
Nathan Drake gets his ass kicked sometimes, and Bloodborne, I'm not good at Bloodborne. It was worth the time and investment to see all of this, for me anyways, and I don't know how much I'm going to play my PS4 going forward, but I plan on playing Outriders on Game Pass, and everything multi-platform, be it Destiny or Warzone, runs best on my PC, which is better and more ideal than a PS5. But after a glorious 18 months or so with my PS4, I feel my heyday with it coming to a close. I'll plan to keep it forever, mostly because from a hardware perspective, it's essentially worthless. But also because someday, maybe a year from now, maybe 5 years from now, Maybe when I get a new TV or a new apartment or something else in my life shifts in such a way that I need this specific kind of solo comfort again, I'll return to my PS4 once again.